You guys, we're going to learn how to make a pouch pot today. This is the one that I made for my class yesterday. I'll show you the finished product.
But it hasn't been fired yet?
It has not been fired yet, but it is now leather hard. Do you know why it's leather hard? Even though it was wrapped in plastic, it got leather hard. Any guesses as to why?
You left it on that board?
I left it on the board and it sucked a lot of the moisture out. I have my newspaper. Now I could leave my newspaper in there. This was holding the pouch up. And the worst thing that would happen is it would smell a little bit like burning paper when I'm firing it. And the paper will just burn up. And then when I get it out of the kiln, I'll have to shake all the ashes into the trash can. Or I can, if I'm very careful, I can pull out my paper right now. I don't need it in there anymore because my clay is now stiff and leather hard. And so you can see that this is where I'm going to put spoons. This is a spoon pouch. And it's all ready to put in the kiln room. It's not ready to fire yet. And why isn't it ready to fire yet? Who remembers why it would definitely not want to put this in the kiln right now?
It's not like dry.
Yeah, it needs to be completely bone dry. What's another name for bone dry?
Is it like greenware?
Greenware, exactly. So I need to, but I can put it in the kiln room and it'll get to the greenware state eventually, and then I can put it, you know, in the kiln. So I'm going to set this over here. The first thing I want you to do is plan out your pouch pot so that it's really creative and unique. If you plan a project out, it turns out so much better. So I have made a planning worksheet for you guys, and you're going to be filling this out as you go along. And you can start doing this tomorrow. The first thing you're going to do is come up with 10 ideas for a theme. And they can be anything that your pouch pot is going to be about. You're going to list them there, and then you're going to circle your favorite one. So I wrote down for mine, because I was just brainstorming to myself, I put ocean, outer space, nature, water, leaves. I was thinking I could get some leaves outside and roll them into my clay. Knitting, because I thought it would be really cool to put knitting needles in my pouch. I thought I could do a face like that one I showed you on our slideshow. A peace pouch, because the International Day of Peace is coming up and I was just thinking about that. Spoon pouch, and I went with the spoon, and then I had to decide what shape do I want the back part of the pouch to be and how far do I want the pouch to stick out. Now if you were going to put a plant in the pouch, it needs to stick out a lot further than mine did, but I just want to put wooden spoons in mine, so I just needed it to stick out enough to get some spoons in there. So so I made some templates. This was the template for my back part, and this was the template for my pouch part. If the wider this is, the more it's going to poke out. Does that make sense? So if I wanted this to come out a lot further because I want it to be enough for a plant, then I have to make this wider so that then it bows out a lot more. So something to think about when you're designing it. Now I have a maximum and minimum size that I describe them right here on this handout. Your height plus your width can be no more than 18 inches. That's the maximum size. The minimum size is height plus width equals 14 inches. The reason I made those requirements is that if you make giant ones, we might run out of clay or they might not fit in the kiln. So, but if you make really tiny ones, it's not really fair for grading wise for you to have to do a tiny one and everybody else have to do big ones. So I kind of want them in there, but you have a range. This one, if you measure, I measured this from the widest part across, and I think this was 6.5 inches, if I'm not mistaken, and I think this was 11 inches from top to bottom. So 11 inches plus 6.5 inches is 15.5 inches, right? And that is definitely within the range. Not too big, not too small. Now you might be thinking, how did I get this shape? Because most of you are going to want to make it symmetrical, right? I just took a piece of scratch paper and I folded it And I did this a couple times until I got it the way I liked it. And I just cut it out when it was folded so that it would be the same. And you can play around with this. And then once you like it, then you can trace it onto something a little bit heavier, like a piece of poster board. When you're doing this, please, like, poster board, I'm going to try to get out all my old faded poster board that we wouldn't really want to use anyways, but you want to preserve it, so you want to make sure that when you're making your template, you go to the edge of the board. Don't just put this right in the middle and waste all the poster board, you know what I mean? Okay, so here's my templates. I also made a template because I thought I wanted to put some slabs on top. So I made a few templates like that. The next thing you're going to do is sketch out your idea and show your textures. This is worth, you know, you're going to be turning this in for a grade, so you want to make sure you complete all the parts. Rather than trying to draw the texture on there, the easiest thing to do is if you know, like I really like this wood texture mat, and I thought, well, it makes sense if it's going to be a wooden spoon holder to make the texture look like wood. And so I'm planning on using this for my texture. So I just laid my drawing on top of it and I did a texture rubbing. Way easier than drawing the texture, you know what I mean? And everywhere I wanted that texture, I put it on there. And I did that with the other textures. So I just did a texture rubbing. This was my plan. Now, when you make your plan, you know, you can change your mind. Excuse me, I got some in my eye. So don't feel that it has to look exactly like this plan. But a project that's planned out always looks better. Okay, any questions so far? So once you've done this and you've done this, you're going to bring these and show me, and then I'm going to let you have your slab. So these have to be done first. You'll probably bring it back to the slab roller, and either Alex or myself will help you cut out a slab that's the right size for your project. Okay. One of the things I want to make sure, and this is why I'm going to have Alex help, is that I want to make sure nobody comes over and puts their template right in the middle of a clay slab like that. Why would that not be cool? Yes.
It'd be wasting all the clay on the sides.
Yeah, it really would be wasteful. You want to treat this like a really expensive fabric. So we're going to try to put it over like as close to the edge as possible for when you cut it out. So I'm going to need a board. Would somebody go get me a board out of the Masonite board thing? One of the larger size boards. There's two different sizes. There's small and then there's a larger one. Remember what happened when we worked on the table before? Did this happen to some of you where your name tag got stuck to the table? Thank you so much. You always want to work on a board because you don't want your clay sticking to the table. Yes?
No, I was just saying that mine.
Yours did? You had that problem? Okay, so now we've learned the hard way. I'm just going to use my needle tool to cut this out. I just find that cutting it out with the needle tool is a little bit easier than using the fettling knife. So now that I've got it close to the edge, I'm going to go around it like this. You'll probably be doing this part on the slab roller there, but anyways, that's one piece. Now I need to cut out the other piece, which is the pouch part, and I want to put that as close as possible to here. So maybe I'll put it there. Now I guess what you're going to want to do before you even do this is make yourself some slip, because we're not using the same clay we use for the nameplate. Does this clay, it looks a lot similar to that clay, doesn't it? It's really different clay. This is called Vashon Buff. Guess where you get Vashon Buff clay? They dig it out of the ground there.
France?
No, it's a lot closer than that. Have you guys ever been to Vashon Island? It's a little island right across from Seattle. And they get this clay on Vashon Island. It's really close. Anyways, I just thought that was kind of interesting. This is a medium high fire clay. The reason that I switched to this clay instead of doing the red terracotta like I was going to earlier, Ginger, this is for you, was that do you have to go now, Ginger? Does it say go now? Okay. Hate for you to miss my demonstration, but we are videotaping it, so you can always look at it online. I'm going to put this in a bag so it doesn't dry out. Hey, see these bags? Aren't those great? The library gave us all of these Ziploc bags, these big bags. Guess what? Those came in those bags. Yeah, your netbooks came in those bags. So you can have a bag like that if you like, because I have a whole bunch of them. Now I want to smooth out the texture on here, so I'm going to use I like to use my blue rib.
Is it because the metal rib cuts you?
The metal rib sometimes digs into the clay more than I want it to, and yes, it can cut you if you're not careful.
Does it dry out in that bag?
Not if you keep it off the board. What I do to keep it from drying out is I try to make this plastic stick to the clay so that no air can get to that part, and it keeps it pretty moist. If I had the clay on this board, it would dry out. So sometimes I slip the clay in the plastic and then I put it on the board. You only have to wrap up your clay if you're not finished with it. Once you're done with it, you can let it dry out. You've got to let it dry out before you fire it anyways. But to keep the clay plastic, it needs to be wrapped up. Okay, so I was going to put, I need a rolling pin. Would you grab me a small rolling pin? I was going to put that wood texture here. Thank you. Like, I doubt you're going to finish your pouch pot all in one day, so you probably will end up wrapping it up. I wish this was a little bit bigger, but we'll do it in two stages. So I'm going to roll this in. You don't really need to roll hard, just enough to get the texture in there. Peel that up. Ooh, that looks beautiful. Then I'm going to move it down. Pull the rest of the way. Okay, so while this is boiling, I'm going to put it over here and kind of cover it with plastic so it doesn't dry out while I'm working on this part. I think I'm going to go ahead and roll the wood texture on this part too. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that. In my drawing, I hadn't. But you can always change your mind from your drawing because you've had time to think about it. So I'm going to put it on here and roll it in here too. You know how sometimes when you're rolling something in the clay, it gets all distorted? Something like that. You can go ahead and put this back on there and cut it out again if it gets all stretched out, if you want to. All right, so then I was thinking it would look really cool to attach some spoons on there that were made out of clay, but I don't want to use clay that's this thick because it will be too thick. So what you do if you want to do that, I'm going to see if this scrap is big enough. Take a scrap of clay, it's over here, and then roll it out to be, I like to roll in different directions so that it's evenly rolled. You know, clay has a memory and it wants to shrink back to the way it used to be, so it keeps it from working if you go both directions. I want it to be like an 1/8 of an inch thick. It's going to be really thin. See how thin that is? If you want to put decorations, let's say you wanted to put some leaf shapes on there. Like you wanted to go outside and collect some leaves and roll them in there and then attach them to the surface. You would roll it out this thin and then you would put the leaf on top and roll it a little bit more and then cut it out. Now I'm just going to take my, I made a little spoon template. I think I'm going to use this one instead of the bigger one on this one. And carefully cut it out. Actually, I'm going to roll this texture texture in it first. I got this piece of lace. Kind of liked the way the lace looked in there, and the handle's gonna be the lace. I just thought it would be kind of neat to have a different texture on the handle, so I'm gonna place this to where this part's the handle, and now I'm gonna cut it out. If I had cut this out first and then rolled the texture onto the handle, what would have happened? There was a reason I didn't do it that way. Yes.
The spoon would get all squishy.
It would get all out of shape, so you're right, Lloyd. So stuff to think about. One option you might want to do if you're a little nervous, I've done this, oh, would somebody close the door? Ginger, would you mind closing the door there? It's going to get really noisy.
Wow.
Uh-oh, it's kind of sticking on there. This is an excellent use of the metal rib. This is my main use for the when it wants to stick, I pull it up with the metal rib, like so. There's one of my spoons. The reason that stuck is it got kind of wet on that part of the board. I should have used a drier part of the board. That was kind of a mistake. Okay, cut it off. I'm going to make 2 of these, but I'm going to put it on a drier part of the board. Oh, it just fits. If you have any questions, just, you can ask at any time. Maybe you're thinking of a really unusual theme. Okay, there's my other one. I'm going to show you a trick for attaching your clay. Now, if I'm attaching 2 plastic pieces of, if I'm attaching 2 plastic pieces of clay, what do I have to do to make those 2 pieces stick together? We wrote this in our notes the other day.
Score.
Normally, you wouldn't have to, but I am going to score and add slip. Normally, with plastic clay, you just have to blend. But if I were to take my spoon shapes and blend them on here, I'd mess up the edges, wouldn't I? So if you can't blend, then go ahead and score and add slip. I just made some, would you hand me that slip right there? I made some slip out of Vashon Buff clay. You cannot use the slip that if you made slip already, I don't know if you guys did. I think I'll use my scoring tool. And I like the scoring tool because I can add the slip and do the scoring at the same time. I'm adding it to the back of my little shape, my spoon shape, and this is a common trick that potters use for attaching parts. This is very delicate. I have to be so careful. Okay. Then I'm going to carefully pick it up and place it wherever I want it to go, which is right there. But I haven't scored and slipped the other side yet. So this is going to help me know where to do it. I'm just going to press it lightly in there and then peel it back up. And it's going to leave, a residue. You guys see that? And now I know exactly where to score here. The reason that you can't use, like say low fire white slip with Vashon Buff clay is that low fire clay shrinks a little bit less. And if they don't shrink exactly the same, things come off. So you gotta use the same one. So sadly that got separated, but it's not that big a deal. So now I'm gonna gently press that in. I wanna make sure that I press out any air pockets that would get trapped there. So I like to stroke it to where hopefully I've moved them out to the edges. Put this guy on. This clay is really, so you have to be really careful when the clay is this soft. And I'm going to gently press down, hoping not to mess up my texture. Press that in place. Then I like to use this wood trimming tool to clean up along the edges, just very gently. If you need to do that. And then I wanted my spoon to look a little bit indented in the middle, so I'm going to take my my rib and see if I can create a little indent. Just a little one. Okay. Number one, I gotta do the same thing with this one, but I'm gonna make this one a little bit lower. Apply slip. So tomorrow I'm thinking what you'll probably get done is get your template made. You'll probably get your drawing done, and then we probably won't be ready for our clay until Monday. But Monday, since many of you will be ready for your clay, I'm probably not going to give you a warm-up sketch that day, so you have more time in class to actually work with the clay. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here, where I lay it where I want it to go. Kind of press it down. Peel it back up so I know where to score and slip. Again, I did it again. Score a little bit slip. You don't really need to score very deeply because this clay is so soft. If this were leather hard clay, oops, upside down, you'd have to score a lot deeper. This might even be overkill, but I just didn't want this to come off later. Sometimes you'll put things on your clay and you'll think, oh, that looks so good. And then when it dries, you find that things just come right off because they weren't scored and slipped enough. Another thing you can do is just take, your sponge and kind of clean up the edge if you prefer. My fingers are too big to do this. And then I'm just going to cut off this part right here. Alright, so I'm going to pick this up and show you. Here's my front pouch. I might move this out of the way now. And here's my back slab. Now I'm going to go get some newspaper out of the newspaper cabinet. When you're wadding up your newspaper, I recommend wadding everything towards the middle. Like this. So that one side is kind of smooth. And you want to wad it up to be about the right size for your pouch. We'll see if this is going to work. Got some dust on there. Is that going to fit? That might be a little bit, I might need to flatten this a little bit. Let's try that. Because I didn't make my pouch very big, it's not going to stick out that far. I think that's better. Okay, so now that I'm ready, there's two ways I can attach this pouch. I could blend the clay right here, but if I did that, I might mess up my texture. So if I'm not going to blend it, I'll have to score and slip. So what I'm going to do is score and slip the edge. Just supporting it as I go around. Figure out where it's going to attach here. Oops. Press it down so I know where to score the other way. Okay, so I kind of get an idea of where I'm supposed to score and slip here. But what I was about to say, and I think I forgot to tell you, if you want to work with a partner, if you're a little nervous about this, what I recommend doing is find a partner. Find somebody in here you enjoy working with, and both of you make one person's pouch pot together, and then do the next person's. And then you have two people working on the same things. Of course, one person will be the main artist, and the other person will just be the assistant. But I like to do things that way, because then having a partner can make the whole experience seem a little less intimidating. Okay, so I pressed all that down. I've got my bulge it out there a little bit. See this edge right here that doesn't look all that great? Oh, by the way, you guys, we cannot throw these scraps into the bin that has the low-fire white in it. You can't mix those two kinds of clay. So I'm making a new bin over here that's gonna be just for the Vashon Buff clay. I'll put a sign on it so you'll know. I'm just gonna maybe take my needle tool and trim a little bit around here so it's a little more even to make it look a little nicer. And then this is another option. If you can find a texture, like I thought it would look really great since I'm all about the spoons. Let's pretend like this is a spoon and not a fork. I like the little end of this. It's kind of have a little design on it. And I thought I would just maybe indent along the edge to create a little design. It kind of helps to make sure the clay is going to stay attached to. Sort of optional thing. Maybe I won't do it right there. I want to mess up my spoon. If you're not sure you're going to like the way that looks, get a scrap of clay and indent into that to make sure you like the way the indent looks before you do it on yours. So far, this is what it looks like so far. It's still pretty soft. Another thing I can do is, I kind of like making this top part flare out a bit, so maybe what I'm going to do is just run my finger along here, and I can make that flare out. Another thing I could do to make the edge look better is I could get a long slab of clay and attach the edge. That's what I did on my other one. I'll show you. I wanted to create a little lip here, so I just cut out a skinny strip of clay and I attached it by scoring and slipping, and then I just indented a design on it. I thought that looked kind of nice. I'm not going to do it on this one because I kind of like the way this one looks without it. And any questions on this? Now, I wasn't too crazy about the way I did these things. I thought they looked kind of weird, so I'm not going to necessarily do it the same way. I'll try to do it a little more subtly. But you need to have holes for hanging. You can either make a hole at the very top, or you can make two holes lower down and then string a wire through them. But if you want to do that, you kind of need to have a recessed part. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find something round, like this might work, and I'm going to press it in there to make kind of a recessed area where I can then put a button. I'm going to make my own clay button too, you'll see what I mean. So I indented it there. Now I'm going to take a straw. There's one. If the straw has dried clay in it, you just squeeze the clay and then just make it go out. And then I'm going to, oops, that one wasn't very clean. Okay, then I'm going to take a piece of fresh, I want to make sure I'm using Vashon Buff. There's Vashon Buff. So you can pinch a little piece of clay off the block, or maybe I'll have some cut up for you to use for this, because you want to make sure this is plastic clay and not leather hard clay, or you don't want to use clay that has an air pocket. I'm going to make two little balls that are exactly the same size. There's one. And this one's a little bit bigger, pinch them off. Okay, so far I've got two balls that are exactly the same size. And I had this little checker piece. There it is. I don't know, I just thought I would see what it looked like when I did that. So I'm going to push it down, make a little button that later I will use here and here. But I need to make two little holes in there. I I don't think, I wish I had one of those small Starbucks straws that you get with your latte, you know, but I don't have one of those, so I'm just gonna maybe use a pencil on this one. Poke a hole here, hole here. It's got, remember these are gonna shrink, so your clay's gonna shrink from 10 to 13%. Make your hole big enough to where when it shrinks, you could still fit a piece of wire through it, like that. And I'm just gonna let these get fired with my pouch pot. And the very last thing I do, I could get this leather hard first if I want to, because I might be nervous about picking it up. You know how if you pick it up you could distort it, but I'm just going to be real careful. So I'm going to very carefully pick up my pouch pot and then make sure there's nothing on the back. Write my full name using a pencil. I'm going to incise my full name and period. So you guys will put period too. I'm going to set it down back onto here. And then you just kind of have to go, do I want to fuss around with this anymore? If there's like an edge that you wanted to carve off or something that you wanted to do with carving, you can't carve plastic clay. It just sticks to your tool, so it doesn't work. But if I wanted to let this get leather hard, then the next day I could trim the edge of this spoon to where it looks a little bit neater, because it'll just be like shaving a bar of soap. When the clay is really stiff, I can go like, where's that other one? I keep picking up. Here's my leather hard one. Now that this is leather hard, I can take my tool, or whichever tool I feel like would work best. Sometimes it's maybe the needle tool, or oh, this is a good tool. And I can just trim the edge to look a little bit neater. So you can do some fixing up, like I could go around the edge here and make that look a little bit neater once it's leather hard. Because when I do that, the clay just falls off the tool. But if it's plastic clay, it's just going to stick to the tool and it's going to make a big mess. Any questions about that? That's it. Now you just have to let this get completely bone dry and then fire it. And then this, I think I forgot to finish telling you about this Vachon Buff clay. I fire it to a much hotter temperature so that it can stand up to outdoor temperatures. So if you wanted to make a pouch pot that would live on your porch or somehow be outside, it wouldn't just fall apart and get in the rain and the hot and the cold. So that's why we switched over to this Vachon Buff clay. It's a lot stronger. The low fire white would be fine for using indoors. The other thing I really like about the Vachon Buff is when you fire it, let me show you a little example. This was done with Vachon Buff clay and Bernard slip. See how it looks kind of like stone? I just love the way that clay looks. It's sort of got that rock-like texture. That's what it'll look like when you fire yours with the Vachon Buff, because the clay doesn't get white.
It looks like wood.
It kind of does look like wood. I just think that's so pretty. So I thought you would probably like the way that looked on your pouch pots. Okay, we're done. Thank you, Alex.